Welcome to my channel, and today I want to share a story that teaches a powerful lesson about controlling your emotions, finding inner strength, and transforming your life. It's about a young man who struggles with anger, loses his way, and learns how to master himself to create peace, respect, and true strength. So let us start this journey together and see how one person's choice to change can inspire everyone around him. In a quiet rural town tucked between endless stretches of golden farmland and dusty roads, there lived a young man named Ethan Parker. From the outside, Ethan looked like someone destined for success. He was sharp-minded, physically strong, and known for his ability to learn things quickly. Teachers had once praised him, neighbors admired his work ethic, and people often said that if Ethan stayed focused, he could go far in life. Yet behind that promising image lived a dangerous flaw that quietly shaped his fate: his inability to control his emotions. Ethan felt everything intensely: joy, frustration, pride, disappointment. Each emotion rose inside him like a sudden flame. When something pleased him, he felt unstoppable. But when something irritated him, even slightly, his anger surged without warning. He spoke before thinking. He reacted before understanding. A small comment could trigger a loud argument. A minor mistake could lead to broken objects and harsh words. People around him learned to walk carefully, afraid of setting him off. He lived with his mother, Margaret Parker, a kind and soft-spoken woman who had raised him alone since his father passed away many years earlier. Margaret had spent her life sacrificing her comfort to ensure Ethan had food, education, and guidance. She believed deeply in her son, but she also worried about him more than she ever admitted. Many evenings, as the sun dipped below the fields and the house filled with quiet shadows, Margaret would gently remind him, "Ethan, the world is not against you. Your anger is the real battle you must face." Ethan always brushed off her words. To him, anger felt like power. Reacting quickly made him feel strong, fearless, and dominant. He believed staying quiet meant weakness. What he never stopped to consider was how much each outburst cost him. Friendships faded, opportunities slipped away, respect turned into fear, and fear never lasted. Despite everything, Ethan wanted to succeed. When he was offered a job at a local mechanical workshop, it felt like a turning point. The workshop was well known in town, owned by a firm but fair man named Robert Collins. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it offered stability. Something Ethan and his mother desperately needed. The night before his first day, Margaret prepared dinner with unusual care. She watched Ethan eat, noticing the restless tapping of his fingers and the tension in his shoulders. "Tomorrow is important," she said gently. "Control your emotions. Good opportunities don't come often," Ethan smiled confidently. "Don't worry, Mum, I've got this." But confidence without control is fragile. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the workshop early. The smell of oil, metal, and machinery filled the air. He was assigned simple tasks: cleaning tools, organizing equipment, assisting senior workers. Everything went smoothly at first. He worked fast, eager to prove himself. Around midday, as workers gathered for lunch, an elderly co-worker named Henry Wilson, whose hands trembled with age, accidentally knocked over a container of oil. The thick liquid spilled across the floor and splashed onto Ethan's shirt. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. Henry froze, his face pale with fear. "I'm so sorry," the old man said softly. "It was an accident." Anyone else might have laughed it off or brushed it aside. But Ethan's anger ignited instantly. "What's wrong with you?" Ethan shouted. "Can't you see what you're doing?" The entire workshop fell silent. Tools stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Henry's shoulders slumped as he apologized again, his voice barely audible. The damage was already done. That evening, Ethan was called into Robert Collins's office. The owner sat behind his desk, his expression calm but serious. "You have talent," Robert said, "but talent without self-control is useless. This workshop is built on respect, not fear. We can't keep someone who reacts like that." With those words, Ethan lost his job on his very first day. He walked home with anger burning inside him. telling himself that people were too sensitive, too weak to handle honesty. Yet beneath that anger lived a deep sense of shame he refused to acknowledge. When he told his mother what had happened, Margaret listened quietly. Then she said something that cut deeper than any criticism. "You didn't lose your job because of others," she said softly. "You lost it because you couldn't control yourself." Ethan said nothing. He retreated to his room and slammed the door, unaware that this moment marked the beginning of a long and painful awakening. After losing the workshop job, Ethan Parker told himself it was just bad luck. He convinced himself that the owner had overreacted and that the old co-worker should have been more careful. These thoughts gave him temporary comfort, but they did nothing to change the truth. Days passed, and the house that once felt warm and hopeful grew heavier with silence. Ethan began searching for work again. Every morning, he put on his worn jacket and walked through town, asking about openings at stores, warehouses, and repair shops. On the surface, he looked determined. Inside, however, his emotions stayed restless and raw, always waiting for the smallest spark. At one store, a manager corrected the way Ethan filled out an application. Ethan felt insulted and responded sharply. The interview ended early. At another place, a supervisor suggested he slow down and follow instructions. Ethan raised his voice, insisting he knew better. He was politely shown the door. Each rejection added another layer of frustration, and instead of reflecting, Ethan allowed anger to tighten its grip. People began to notice the pattern. Shop owners exchanged looks. Neighbors whispered quietly. Some employers recognized his name and avoided conversations altogether. Ethan didn't realize it, but his reputation was being shaped, not by his skills, but by his reactions. At home, Margaret watched her son with growing concern. She noticed how his shoulders were always tense, how his words came out sharp even during normal conversations. She wanted to help him, but she also knew that real change could not be forced. One evening, after another unsuccessful day, Ethan returned home later than usual. As he entered the house, he heard a faint cough coming from the living room. His mother was sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch. Her face looked pale, and her breathing sounded shallow. "Mom?" Ethan asked, alarmed. "Are you okay?" Margaret smiled weakly. "I'm fine, Ethan, just a little tired." But Ethan knew better. He knelt beside her, noticing how thin her hands felt in his own. For the first time, fear pierced through his anger. This wasn't something he could argue with or shout away. That night, after helping his mother to bed, Ethan sat alone in the dark. The house felt unusually quiet. His thoughts, however, were louder than ever. Memories replayed in his mind, arguments, lost jobs, disappointed faces, slammed doors. Slowly, a painful realization formed. No matter where he went, the same thing followed him. His anger. Tears filled his eyes, surprising him. He had always believed emotions were a weakness, yet here he was, overwhelmed by them. For the first time, he questioned himself instead of blaming the world. Later that night, he sat beside his mother's bed. "I keep failing," he said quietly. "I don't want to be this way anymore, but I don't know how to change." Margaret reached out and gently placed her hand on his head, just as she had when he was a child. "If you truly want to change," she said softly, "seek guidance from someone who understands the mind. There is a wise teacher who lives near the river. He helps those who are willing to help themselves." Ethan nodded, unsure but desperate. That night, something shifted inside him. Not a solution, but a willingness to search for one. The next morning, Ethan Parker woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of his mother's breathing from the other room. He stood still for a moment, watching the soft light creep through the window. For the first time in a long while, he felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not frustration, but uncertainty mixed with hope. After making sure his mother was comfortable, Ethan stepped outside and began the walk toward the river. The path was long and narrow, cutting through fields that shimmered with morning dew. Birds called softly from distant trees, and the air felt calm, almost untouched by the chaos that lived inside his mind. By the riverbank stood a small wooden hut, simple and weathered by time. Sitting outside was an elderly man with silver hair and calm eyes. He wore plain clothes and held a walking stick carved smooth from years of use. This was Daniel Harper, the teacher his mother had spoken of. Ethan hesitated before stepping closer. "I was told you help people," Ethan said cautiously. Daniel looked up and smiled gently. "I help those who are ready to see themselves," he replied. Ethan sat across from him and began speaking. At first, the words came fast, spilling out with frustration. He talked about lost jobs, broken opportunities, anger that rose without warning, and the shame he tried to hide behind confidence. Daniel listened quietly, never interrupting, his expression calm and steady. When Ethan finally stopped, exhausted, the teacher spoke. "Your emotions are not the problem," Daniel said. "Your relationship with them is." Ethan frowned. "I don't understand." Daniel picked up a small stick and drew a line in the sand. "Emotion appears here," he said, tapping one side of the line. "Action happens there," he tapped the other side. "Between them exists a pause. Most people never notice it, but that pause is where choice lives." Ethan stared at the line, unsure what to say. "I react before thinking," Ethan admitted. "It feels automatic." Daniel nodded. "That is because you have practiced reacting for years. Habits grow stronger with repetition." He then handed Ethan a clear glass jar. "Today, every time you feel anger, irritation, or frustration, fill this jar with water. Do not judge yourself, just observe." Ethan felt skeptical but agreed. As he walked back through town, he became painfully aware of how often his emotions shifted. Someone walked too slowly in front of him. He felt irritation. A shopkeeper ignored him. Annoyance rose. A memory crossed his mind. Anger followed. Each time he poured water into the jar. By midday, the jar was half full. By evening, it overflowed. Ethan stared at it in disbelief when he returned to the river. "I didn't realize," he said quietly. "It never stops." Daniel nodded. "You believed anger was strength. In truth, it has been controlling you." That night, Ethan walked home silently. For the first time, he didn't feel defensive. He felt aware, and that awareness was heavier than anger had ever been. The following morning, Ethan Parker returned to the river just as the sun rose over the fields. Mist floated gently above the water, and the world felt unusually still. Daniel Harper stood near the riverbank, watching the current flow without interruption. "Today," Daniel said, "you will not speak." Ethan looked confused but nodded. They began walking along a narrow path that stretched across quiet fields and clusters of trees. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Ethan wanted to ask questions, to explain himself, to fill the empty space with words. But he remained quiet, just as he was told. Without conversation, his thoughts grew louder. Memories surfaced without warning. Arguments with co-workers, harsh words spoken to his mother, moments of pride followed by regret. His mind jumped from one thought to another, restless and impatient. As the walk continued, Ethan felt overwhelmed. He realized how little control he had over his own thinking. Even in silence, his mind refused to rest. When they finally stopped, Ethan broke the silence with a whisper. "My mind feels like it's racing." Daniel nodded calmly. "Most people think silence quiets the mind. In reality, silence reveals it." Ethan sat on a rock near the river, staring at the water as it flowed steadily forward. For the first time, he noticed how different the river was from his thoughts. The water moved smoothly, without resistance, while his mind felt tangled and chaotic. "You cannot guide emotions you do not notice," Daniel said. "Awareness is the foundation of self-control." That evening, Ethan returned home feeling mentally exhausted, yet strangely lighter. He didn't argue, he didn't slam doors. He simply listened as his mother spoke, noticing how often he usually interrupted her. That night, for the first time in years, he slept without anger weighing on his chest. The next day, Ethan Parker returned to the river as the sun climbed higher into the sky. Daniel Harper was already waiting, sitting calmly beside a small wooden table. On it rested 2 clear cups. Without speaking at first, Daniel filled one cup with fresh, clear water and added honey until it shimmered with sweetness. In the other cup, he poured water and added a dark, bitter liquid until the surface clouded. Daniel pushed the cups toward Ethan. "One is sweet," he said. "The other is bitter." Ethan nodded. "Today," Daniel continued, "you will offer sweetness to someone you care about and bitterness to someone who has hurt you." Ethan froze. "Why would I give bitterness to anyone?" he asked. Daniel's voice remained gentle. "Because that is what you have been giving all along, through harsh words, anger, and impatience. Today I want you to understand what it feels like to offer that bitterness." Ethan didn't argue. He carried the lesson with him as he walked through town. When he visited his mother, he imagined handing her the sweet cup. Her kindness, her patience, her sacrifices, all deserved sweetness. Then his thoughts shifted to others. Co-workers he had shouted at, strangers he had argued with, people who had simply made mistakes. He imagined offering them the bitter cup and felt a deep heaviness in his chest. By the time he returned to the river, his eyes were filled with tears. "I've hurt people who never deserved it," Ethan said quietly. "I thought I was being honest, but I was spreading bitterness." Daniel placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Understanding the impact of your actions is the beginning of change." Ethan sat silently, feeling remorse settle where anger once lived. For the first time, he didn't feel the urge to defend himself. He felt responsible. The following morning, Ethan Parker met Daniel Harper at the riverbank once more. The early light reflected off the water, casting a golden glow on the calm surface. Daniel gestured for Ethan to sit beside him on the grass. "Yesterday you felt the weight of your actions," Daniel began. "Today I will teach you the most important lesson. It is the key to mastering your emotions." Ethan listened intently, leaning forward. Daniel spoke slowly. "You cannot stop emotions, they are natural. Anger, sadness, jealousy, frustration, they all arise. The mistake is in believing you must act on them immediately. Between every emotion and every reaction, there exists a small pause. That pause is your power." Ethan frowned, trying to understand. "A pause?" "Yes," Daniel continued. "A moment to breathe, to observe, to think before responding. That pause is where clarity lives. Strength is not in shouting or reacting. Strength is in staying calm when your mind urges you to explode." Ethan repeated the words silently. Pause, breathe, observe, respond. They felt strange at first, like trying to lift a weight with untrained muscles. Daniel handed him a small wooden whistle. "Whenever you feel anger rising, blow this whistle quietly to remind yourself to pause. Do not speak, do not act, just notice." That day, as Ethan walked through the town and later returned home, he practiced the pause. When a young boy accidentally bumped into him on the street, Ethan felt irritation flare. He lifted the whistle to his lips, exhaled, and let the anger pass without a word. Later, when a shopkeeper raised his voice over a misunderstanding, Ethan breathed deeply and chose calmness over argument. By evening, the change was subtle but profound. Ethan noticed relief in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He felt lighter, more in control. He returned home and watched his mother move about the kitchen, smiling quietly to herself. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to rush, correct, or assert himself. Instead, he felt awareness, a growing sense that life didn't have to be a battlefield. That night, as he lay in bed, Ethan whispered softly, "So this is the power I've been missing all along." A pause, a choice. A new hope stirred within him, fragile but real, signaling the beginning of transformation. Days passed, and Ethan Parker began practicing what he had learned by Daniel Harper. The pause, the breath, the observation before reaction. At first, it felt unnatural. He stumbled. He still felt the urge to yell or argue, but each time he caught himself, he noticed a small victory. The inner storm still roared, but now he could watch it instead of being swept away. One morning, he returned to the workshop where he had lost his first job. Robert Collins, the owner, looked surprised to see him standing at the doorway. Ethan's stomach tightened. Fear and nervousness coursed through him. For years, he would have stormed in angrily, demanding understanding or reacting defensively. But today, he paused, took a deep breath, and spoke calmly. "Mr. Collins," he said softly, "I behaved poorly before. I reacted without thinking. If you give me another chance, I will not disappoint you. Robert studied him carefully. There was something different in Ethan's eyes. Not defiance, not anger, but quiet determination. After a moment, he nodded. We'll give you a chance, but this is your last opportunity. You must prove yourself. Inside, Ethan felt a mixture of relief and resolve. He returned home that evening and told his mother. Margaret smiled through tears. I always knew you could, she whispered. The next day, Ethan's first challenge came quickly. A co-worker accidentally misread a measurement, ruining part of an order. In the past, Ethan would have exploded. Today, he stopped. He paused, breathed, and then calmly suggested a solution. The co-worker looked astonished, but the tension dissolved instead of escalating. Customers soon noticed the difference as well. When someone raised their voice in frustration, Ethan listened, nodded, and responded politely. Slowly, respect began replacing fear. That night, Ethan sat beside the river reflecting. The pause was working, but he realized it was more than a simple technique. It was changing how he viewed himself. Strength was no longer proving power over others. It was mastering himself. Weeks passed, and Ethan Parker began noticing subtle but meaningful changes in his world. His co-workers, who once avoided him or dreaded his reactions, now approached him with respect. When mistakes happened, he guided rather than criticized. When customers complained, he listened patiently. It was as if the simple act of pausing and observing before responding had created a ripple of calm wherever he went. One evening, Margaret noticed the change most clearly. Ethan returned home from the workshop with a tired but satisfied expression. He helped with the small chores around the house, spoke softly, and even shared small moments of humor without losing patience. Ethan, she said gently, as they sat at the kitchen table, I see a difference in you. Your anger no longer controls you. You're learning to respond instead of reacting. Ethan smiled, a little embarrassed but grateful. It feels strange at first, Mum. I still feel the fire inside, but now I can watch it without letting it control me. She reached out, taking his hand. That fire can be a strength if you guide it, but only control and understanding turn it into power. The next day at the workshop, Ethan faced another challenge. A young apprentice, new to the shop, accidentally dropped a toolbox, spilling nuts, bolts, and small tools across the floor. In the past, Ethan would have shouted or grabbed the boy in frustration, but today, he stopped. He took a deep breath, helped the boy pick up the tools, and calmly explained how to handle them next time. The apprentice looked at him, wide-eyed. Thank you, he said quietly. It was a small moment, but for Ethan, it felt monumental. Each controlled reaction built trust. Each calm solution strengthened relationships that anger had previously broken. He began to understand that leadership was not about being the loudest voice. It was about being steady when others faltered. That night, Ethan sat by the river once more. The water flowed steadily, reflecting the stars. He thought about the jar of water he had filled with his anger, the bitter and sweet cups, and the moments of reflection Daniel Harper had guided him through. He realized that his past mistakes, while painful, had been lessons he needed to reach this point. Margaret watched from the doorway as Ethan spoke quietly to himself, almost in a whisper. I'm learning. Slowly, but truly. I won't let anger rule me anymore. She smiled softly, knowing that her son had begun to transform. Not overnight, but one thoughtful moment at a time. The weeks turned into months, and Ethan Parker began to feel a new sense of balance in his life. He still experienced frustration, annoyance, and anger. They had not disappeared, but he no longer allowed them to dictate his actions. The pause, the breath, the observation before response had become second nature. Slowly, the townspeople started to notice. At the workshop, his reputation shifted. Where once co-workers feared his outbursts, they now sought his advice. Customers who had complained in the past now left smiling, appreciating his calm demeanor and clear solutions. Robert Collins, the owner, began assigning Ethan more responsibility, trusting him with tasks that required precision and patience. In one afternoon, the workshop received a rush order for an urgent repair. Everyone was stressed and tired. Tools clattered, instructions overlapped, and tempers flared. Ethan took a deep breath, observing the chaos. Instead of adding to the stress, he calmly organized the workflow, delegated tasks, and guided co-workers patiently. By the end of the day, the job was completed flawlessly. His co-workers gathered around him quietly, nodding in respect. Ethan realized that his ability to stay composed had not only earned him trust, it had made him a leader. At home, Margaret noticed how her son's new habits were affecting their family life. Conversations were calmer, meals were shared without tension. Even small disagreements were handled with patience and understanding. Her heart, once heavy with worry, now felt lighter. Ethan's growth had transformed the energy in their home. Ethan himself felt a profound shift. One evening, while sitting by the river, he reflected on the man he had been. He thought about the jobs lost, the friendships strained, the opportunities wasted, all because of uncontrolled anger. But he also recognized the journey he had undertaken, the lessons of the water jar, the bitter and sweet cups, the silent walks, and the guidance of Daniel Harper. Each step had taught him that true strength was not in reacting, it was in mastering oneself. For the first time, Ethan felt an inner calm that no external event could shake. The fire that had once threatened to consume him now existed as a controlled flame, warming his heart without burning those around him. As Ethan Parker continued to master the pause and self-control, his life began to extend beyond his own improvement. The workshop was thriving, and his calm presence influenced everyone around him. He noticed co-workers making mistakes, not with frustration, but with anxiety. In the past, such moments might have triggered his anger. Now, he approached them with patience. One day, a young apprentice, Luke, came running to the workshop in distress. He had accidentally damaged a customer's bicycle during repair. Luke's face was pale, and he was on the verge of tears, fearing Ethan's reaction. But Ethan knelt beside him, took a deep breath, and said calmly, "It's okay. Mistakes happen. Let's figure out how to fix this together." Luke looked up, astonished. "You're not mad?" Ethan smiled gently. "Getting upset won't fix it. Let's focus on the solution." Together, they repaired the bicycle. Luke learned not just the technical skills, but also the value of patience and calm under pressure. For Ethan, moments like this became a source of quiet satisfaction. He realized that controlling one's emotions wasn't just personal. It had the power to shape the lives of others. Word spread around town about Ethan's change. Neighbors noticed he no longer reacted harshly, that he offered guidance instead of criticism, and that even in tense situations, he maintained composure. Slowly, people began seeking him out, not to witness his temper, but to learn from his example. His reputation transformed from that of a feared young man to a trusted and respected figure in the community. At home, Margaret watched these changes with a full heart. Their home, once tense with anger and frustration, now overflowed with warmth and peace. She would sometimes catch Ethan, sitting quietly on the porch, helping neighbors solve small problems, always with patience, always calm. She realized that the lessons he had learned from Daniel Harper were no longer temporary. They were becoming a part of who he truly was. One evening, Ethan reflected by the river. The calm water mirrored the stars, and he thought about how far he had come. The young man who had once lost every job, alienated friends, and frightened his neighbors had transformed. The fire inside him still existed, but now it was guided, purposeful, and life-giving instead of destructive. Ethan finally understood what his mother had always tried to teach him. Strength is not in exploding or controlling others, but in mastering yourself, spreading calm, and helping others navigate life's storms. Life in the town was settling into a calm rhythm for Ethan Parker. But Daniel Harper had warned him that true mastery was not measured in quiet days. It was tested in moments of intense challenge. That test arrived sooner than Ethan expected. One afternoon, a delivery arrived at the workshop. A large, complex order for a wealthy client who demanded perfection. Every detail had to be precise, and any delay would result in a lost contract. Ethan was in charge of coordinating the work. His team was skilled but tense, aware of the high stakes. Just as they began, a co-worker misread the instructions, causing a significant mistake. In the past, Ethan's first instinct would have been to shout, slam tools, or even resign in frustration. But today he paused. He breathed. He assessed the situation clearly. Instead of reacting in anger, he calmly explained the correction steps, reassigned tasks, and encouraged his team to stay focused. His leadership was quiet, firm, and deliberate. The team followed his guidance, and the order was corrected before the deadline. Later that evening, Ethan received another challenge, personal this time. Margaret, his mother, had fallen ill unexpectedly. Her cough worsened, and her pale face reminded him of the moments when he had first realized how fragile she was. Panic and worry threatened to overwhelm him. His old instincts, the urge to snap, to blame, to feel helpless, rose from deep within. For the first time, his emotional mastery would be tested in the most personal way possible. He knelt beside his mother's bed, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "Pause, breathe, observe, respond." Instead of panicking, he calmly assessed the situation. He called the doctor, prepared medicine, and arranged her comfort, all without raising his voice or succumbing to fear. Margaret, weak but aware, looked at him with gratitude. "Ethan, you've changed," she said softly. "I can feel it." That night, Ethan reflected by the river, the familiar current flowing silently beneath the moonlight. He realized that true control was not just in the workplace, not just in avoiding anger, but in facing the most personal, intense challenges without losing composure. Every test, every moment of crisis required awareness, pause, and deliberate action. And for the first time, he felt confident that he could meet life's trials without being consumed by his emotions. The following months marked a turning point in Ethan Parker's life. The lessons he had learned from Daniel Harper, combined with his own determination, had reshaped not only his actions, but his very character. He no longer lived in fear of his emotions, nor did he allow them to control his decisions. He had learned that emotions themselves were natural and necessary, but the true power lay in how one responded to them. At the workshop, Ethan became a cornerstone of reliability and guidance. Co-workers sought his advice, and even the apprentices who once feared making mistakes approached him with confidence, knowing he would guide them with patience rather than criticism. Customers praised his calm and composed manner, and the reputation of the workshop grew under his leadership. At home, Margaret watched her son with pride. The house, once filled with tension and worry, was now a place of peace and laughter. Ethan's calm presence had not only transformed his own life, but had created a ripple of positivity for everyone around him. She remembered the nights when she had feared for his future, when anger and frustration had dominated every moment. Now, she felt reassured that her son had discovered the true strength within himself. One quiet evening, Ethan returned to the river where his journey had begun. The water flowed steadily under the moonlight, reflecting the stars like tiny flames. Sitting on the bank, he reflected on everything he had learned. The jar of water that revealed his anger, the bitter and sweet cups that taught him the impact of his actions, the silent walks that exposed the chaos of his mind, and most importantly, the power of the pause. Ethan whispered to himself, "Pause, breathe, observe, respond." The words no longer felt like instructions. They had become part of him, guiding his choices naturally. He realized that life would always present challenges, frustrations, and moments that tested patience. But now he understood that strength was not measured by how loudly one could express anger, nor by how quickly one could react. True strength lay in calmness, clarity, and self-mastery. It lay in the ability to face every situation with awareness and to act with purpose rather than impulse. From that day on, Ethan lived with a quiet confidence. He embraced joy without attachment, handled setbacks without despair, and approached others with empathy rather than judgment. He became not only a model of patience and self-control, but also a source of inspiration for those around him. People in the town no longer feared him, they admired him. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. He returned home, hugged his mother, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me." Margaret smiled through her tears, knowing that her son had finally understood what she had always hoped he would. that the greatest battle one ever faces is within oneself, and mastering that battle transforms everything. Ethan Parker had learned the most important lesson of all. Emotions are not the enemy. Lack of control is. Those who pause, observe, and respond with clarity win the true battle of life. From anger to patience, from fear to calm, he had become the man he was always meant to be. This story reminds us that true strength doesn't come from shouting, reacting, or controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. We all feel anger, frustration, and fear. But the way we respond to those emotions shapes our lives. By pausing, observing, and choosing clarity over chaos, we can transform not only our own life, but also the lives of those around us. If you enjoyed this story and found its lesson meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire and teach valuable life lessons. Remember, every small change you make today can lead to a better tomorrow. If you like this story, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart in comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting story videos.